Welcome to the latest instalment of In Conversation with Jane Davidson, where I invite guests to look with me at how to encourage more businesses onto the road to sustainability, to look at how sustainable their businesses are or how sustainable they might want their businesses to become in the future. And also to look at what Wales as a country can do in encouraging more businesses to benefit from such an approach. And today we're going to look at housing, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by two eco-entrepreneurs. Firstly, James Williams, Managing Director, co-founder of Sero Homes, a man with an energy background, including a period of time at Triumph Motorcycle Factory in Leicestershire, but now a full convert to looking at how we can live differently. Also with me is the wonderful Glen Peters. Glen Peters I've known for a long time now. Glen is an entrepreneur who has not only developed the first solar farm in Wales, the first building T Solar to incorporate local larch and Douglas fir, built by local people, serving local communities, and also developed a wonderful arts venue in the wilds of North Pembrokeshire, as well as himself being a writer. And Glen comes from a business background in London. And what I'm going to explore with both our guests is what has brought them here. Why have they chosen to do what they do, and why have they chosen to do it here in Wales? So first of all, James, what do you do and why do you do it?
So we're in the business at Sero Homes, and I should say Sero Technologies as well. So it's two companies that we have slightly different activities, but essentially one core purpose, which is to reduce the amount of carbon in our homes, and that applies to both new homes, but the existing homes as well. So Sero Homes is our development business, and that is where we build true zero carbon homes, and that focuses on place, energy, biodiversity. It's from our perspective trying to set the bar as high as we possibly can. And then through our technologies business, we partner with other organizations to take those same lessons and help them to get to their sort of net zero ambitions as well. So that includes housing associations, local authorities, private sector as well. We've got some projects that are going to be sold privately. So a real mix of tenures there, and that's very much a technology approach. So between the two, it's all about reducing the carbon from our homes.
One of the things that really interested me when I was reading up about you for this conversation was that you saw back in 2017 a real interface between manufacturing and renewable energy. And for you, that suddenly became an opportunity to do something about homes. What led you there? Because I think at the time you were actually working for a major renewable energy company.
Yeah, so my background has given me a bit of a mixing pot of, R&D. The automotive sector is very good at R&D, and then also in renewable projects. So really, when Sero started, it was, I think one of the major things is that we still have these silos, the built environment, housing silo, and the energy silo. And what we very much saw was, but you could create solutions on both sides by looking at it as more of a system. The homes that we build have the potential of being an energy solution as well. And for most builders, the grid is that thing at the corner of the site that you have to pay for and plug into. And for the energy system, well, homes are just people who use energy at the wrong time of day. So actually, there's a much more symbiotic relationship available with the right solutions on the ground. So that's what we've set out to really achieve. But you're absolutely right. The future of housing is much more in manufacturing, improving quality of delivery, ensuring we get that quality as well. So performance is a really important part of it too. So I feel like I've come into this in a really random way, going from the automotive sector to a renewable energy development company into housing but it all makes sense, certainly to me.
Do you think that I mean, the model that you and your partner Andy Sutton, architect, have created is a disruptive model in the industry, and one of the things that struck me about the disruption is the fact that you don't sell your homes, do you?
No, so of course what we're looking to do is scale the solution that we can as quickly as we can. And one of the biggest barriers we have is who values zero carbon. And I believe that the public have a growing appreciation of it, but we very much believe that initially a lot of the value will be with institutional funds. And if you look at different, how on the continent you could live in rented accommodation, it's considered to be long-term secure accommodation of high quality. And there's no reason why we can't replicate that here. Of the, I think only about 2-3% of the UK private rented sector is professionally owned, and that's growing all the time, of course. But there's a real opportunity to create a solution that has, institutional investment, that allows us to build very quickly, create very high quality places to live that have that long-term security of tenure as well. So it's build to rent is of course the name that we give to that model, and it's not really developed into family housing so much yet. There's a little bit of it. Really good example, of course, is with Tyrian Homes in Cardiff, of course, who are doing a similar thing with affordable housing, and a partner of ours as well at the same time. But it's a clear opportunity, and actually one that government could take a role in as well.
I think the element of it that most attracted me as a sort of disruptive way of taking this approach was that people don't get charged individually for their energy bills. That actually the system approach actually means that that people pay a small management fee to you in terms of managing the energy, but that actually the bills are therefore paid by the company. So how do you work that out in the context of a home offer to tenants?
So I think this already comes back to the point that if you build the right, as we would consider a net zero carbon home the right way, it doesn't need a lot of energy. What it does need is managing the energy that it has already and delivering that to the customer as comfort. Now, by taking that approach, of course, what you can do is then really drive down the cost of energy by being very clever about how it's used and when it's stored and when it's exported. So that idea of a sort of comfort charge is really there to say, what we don't need to do is sell more energy to these properties. We need to manage the energy that it has already. But what we need to really focus on is how that delivers to the customer as comfort, and that is essentially what people pay for. And of course, while solar will be a big part of just a solution for going forward, and it will introduce new forms of inequality as well. We will have, particularly in social housing, the homes that face south and the homes that don't. Who do you put in which home? So it's a model that is quite disruptive because it's socializing essentially the combined benefit of energy generation. But it works very well in the application, like particularly in a rented scenario.
Okay. And just, I mean, I said at the beginning that you had come out of a very different background. I mean, you spent 5 years, I think, working with Triumph, making high-performance motorbikes. What was your journey about why you wanted to move from, in a sense, high carbon to low carbon?
So I mean, I guess my story is a little more interesting because I actually grew up around climate change. My father was an entrepreneur in the renewable energy sector, and he would say he was doing wind before it was even for climate change. It was just another way of generating power. So I grew up around, very obviously understood the problem I will confess that I didn't have necessarily my own drivers to address it really until my family turned up. I think that that really started to drive my desire to do things better, do things differently. But the automotive industry, I think, is a background that I'm very thankful to have because of the way that it works and the way that it innovates. I was frankly shocked coming into the housing sector when really there hasn't been very little innovation for 20, 30 years, really. Whereas, in the automotive sector, you're always trying to, whether it's reducing costs or making something go faster or making something lighter, there is always a quest to do things differently. And I think that mindset's really great in a housing scenario now. So I think what I would say is I understood the problem and personally felt the need to address it really when my family started to grow.
So this notion of looking after future generations, definitely captured you journey.
Yeah, I read somewhere online that I think at the time my daughter was 2, and she'd been alive for the 2 warmest years on record. I thought that was that was kind of a hard hitting fact. And absolutely, it's a huge driver for me now. And I think that we are leaving a problem behind for the next generation to pick up, whether it's retrofitting the buildings that we build today that aren't good enough, whether it's carrying the cost of higher bills. We are leaving, or the more societal issues, with design and placemaking. We are leaving problems all along the place that they'll need to pick up at some point.
Thank you. And Glen, turning to you, what do you do and why do you do it?
I have a renewables energy company that has in recent years diversified into zero energy housing, and we started off. I started off the company exactly 10 years ago. I had a long history in advising oil companies. Actually, in fact, my major client was BP. I was a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I worked very closely with people like John Brown, who, in fact, he really tried hard. I don't know if you remember, he was the first oil CEO to speak at the Greenpeace conference way back in the 90s. And, he tried to green the company, but the shareholder pressure was such that, he was completely thwarted in those efforts. And, we ended up with concepts like greenwashing, etc., coming then, and that's 20 years last. So when I left my firm 10 years ago, I decided to set up a renewables energy company. And that's how this idea of the solar farm, the place where I live in Pembrokeshire in West Wales, we had some land, and I think that was a time when it was the previous Labour government who was Ed Miliband's idea to have the energy bill, which then came into force when Cameron came to power in 2010. And that was quite a seminal moment for people like myself, where we could actually produce our own energy and actually export it to the grid. And I decided to take a punt, put all my life savings into this solar farm. And people said, "You must be crazy building a solar farm in Wales, the wettest place on the planet." But hey, a year later, we were doing very well in terms of both in terms of we were quite lucky to have a very favorable tariff, but actually the energy production was about 10 to 12% up from the European database at the time. And it was a couple of years later, about 18 months in, I read a report from the War on Want on energy poverty, and up till then I can't say I'd really been hugely aware of the issue of eating versus eating, and I thought, well, here we have all this energy being produced by the sun. Surely it ought to be possible to produce to build a house. It was slightly naive thinking in a way, but it was, why can't we use the power of the sun, this huge source of energy out there in outer space? And a lot of ideas actually come by serendipity. You know, you asked us in your notes about entrepreneurs. You know, you attract people when you put an idea out there. You attract other people who sort of think, yeah, you know, I'm thinking. And I had this very smart young architect at the time, who you know, Gareth Donsey, who had come to the area from the valleys, and he came to me at the opening when we opened the solar farm. He said, you know, I'd really like to do something interesting with you. I said, that's great. And at the same time, we had a German, Jens, who was a carpenter trained in Germany, and he said, you know, I want to build a house. He said, I want to build a wooden house for £10,000, and I could do it really well. And I said, well, that's a crazy idea, but let's work together. So I recruited Gareth, and you know, this is how ideas start. I said, look, let's hot out this time. For 6 months, we researched the world. Jens, coming from Germany, was a great asset, because there, you know, the idea of passive is big, and so we started to look at this. How do we address this energy poverty issue? And we said, well, there are about 3 or 4 things we need to do. One, we need to use as much energy as we can from the sun. So it won't be just electrical energy, but we need to point these houses south. You know, this all sounds to you, it might sound very rudimentary, but I mean, we were learning this stuff very fast. So we said all our houses must at least adopt passive concepts. Secondly, we must make them very cheaply. How to make them cheaply? Well, we should make them out of wood, because wood is a local product. And at the time, there was a blight. There was a blight in larch. We said, let's use all the larch we can get very cheaply. And the third one actually relates to something James was saying about manufacturing. We said, well, actually, it was Henry Ford who made the car. If we're going to make these things cheaply, we need to manufacture them. But we said we haven't got all the capital to have it completely high tech, so we go part of the way. So we thought, I bought a local cow shed, which I gloriously call my eco factory. It's very close to you, Jane, and we fitted it out, and we started to make the shell of the house there. And as you know, Jane, we opened our prototype, which was inaugurated by the then First Minister Cameron Jones, and he came along and he said to all the assembled, we invited the heads of sheds and from all the housing associations and councils here, and he said, "This is the future, you know, guys. It's how we do it." You know, we waited for the phone calls to arrive. Nothing happened. And then we followed up a few weeks later. They said, this idea is too new. We're talking, by the way, time date, we're talking 2016 here. This is too new. We'll never get past our boards. For God's sake, it's made of wood. If only you put a brick skin on the outside, or had PVC windows, you know. So I mean, you know, this is only 4 years ago. And so we said, okay, yeah, what we'll do is we'll go and build our own. So we built a place called Glen Peters Solar, which is again not far from where you live, Jane. And I refinanced part of the solar farm and got the funding to build it. And it's when we opened that, and fortunate enough, Leslie Griffiths was Environment Secretary at the time, so she came along to open it, and that was the beginning of turning the key a little bit to opening up the world a bit. We got very good coverage in the press. The broadsheets came. I remember this great headline in the Guardian that said, "Fantastic, great eating, but you can't have a cat flap." And then gradually things started to open up, and coming back to Wales, and why I think Wales is such a good place to do new things, despite what people say about stodginess and planning, etc., is you're only about 2 or 3 phone calls away from talking to somebody who knows something about it. You can get your arms around stuff, And we were really fortunate to be able to talk to the people who were launching the Innovative Housing Program. And if it wasn't for the Innovative Housing Program, we probably wouldn't be here at this place where we are today. And I was really fortunate to be able to access that funding. And also we had, you know, a new chief executive in what was then Pembrokeshire Housing and today is RTEB. And he's a guy called Nick Hampshire. He said, I want to change this company. I want to change this housing association. We will go ahead on one or two of your projects. And that's how things started to happen. Coastal came on board. So, you know, today where we are, we've built about 25 houses. You know, I'm actually just going back to do a review with the original inhabitants of Glanreed, and they are delighted. In fact, one of them, one of the kids have grown up and they're dying to move out to somewhere else. But this house is so lovely, it's so warm, we just want to leave here, you know. So the user experience has been really, really good. The customer experience has been really good. And just to finish up very quickly, the big barrier, I think the big barrier continues to be the fact that the people who build houses for social housing, they don't really, to me, they don't value the user experience. In fact, I heard one head of strategy telling me the other day saying, he said, you know, the solar thing is not of interest to us anymore because we can't get the benefit of the FIT tariff. So it's of no benefit to us. And I think that's absolutely ludicrous. You know, if people are just looking at unit cost, unit build, a number of things built, you know, they've got their hearts in the wrong place and they're being measured the wrong way. The ultimate thing is user experience, is the tenants, it's tenant value. I mean, as James would know, in this industry, you know, with a zero carbon house, with a properly efficiently heated house, they're saving themselves over a life cycle of 25 years. They're saving themselves about 25,000, 30,000 pounds. And for somebody who is on income support, etc., you know, 1,000 and 1,200 a year is it's a shed load of money. And for housing providers not to be able to factor those things in is really absolutely crazy. So that's to me is the greatest frustration, is changing the metrics in which in the way that we actually value a zero carbon home.
No, I think, and it's such an important point, Glenn, I think, because the if it's not about the tenant experience, then it's not about creating a home. It's about putting something on somebody's balance sheet, an asset on a balance sheet.
Yeah.
But if we, you know, if in a sense, society values the idea that people live in the most efficient homes possible, in the circumstances in which we live, then actually one of the things I really love about your model is that not only do you focus on sustainable energy, but that the wood is locally sourced, the houses are locally built, and all of this is about changing perception. And that period in 2017, when Glanreed came to the world's attention, I mean, you had Countryfile here, you won the LABC Building Excellence Award, the Local Authority Building Control Excellence Award, which was an incredible move from your first model when you could get nobody interested because nobody would offer a mortgage, nobody would deem the house safe in terms of building as a financial proposition.
Yeah. Yes, I think so. I think things have moved on the issue of finance. You know, we've now established a relationship with a building insurance provider, Checkmate, who provide the 12-year guarantee, the insurance guarantee, and that's again turned a key. They offer a particular policy, something called Castle 10 or whatever, and that, you know, with Virgin Money, Principality, anybody, we've just started to sell some houses off plan, and that 12-year assurance is again freed up that that big restraint that we had 4 years ago when people said timber housing never. So yeah, that bit has changed. But my real deep regret at the moment still continues to be it tends to be is social housing. I'm confident now that given the land, etc., I can provide an inexhaustible stream of people who will want to buy a zero carbon home in a good, reasonable price bracket, so that we can make a reasonable amount of return. But that really isn't our entire focus. We really do want to demonstrate that this is actually a model for social housing, and I mean, I don't care really. I don't care if people don't have a T-sort house, but if we're open for other people to come and have a look at what we're doing, to say, this is how we do it. Here's how we heat it. Here's how we insulate it. Come and borrow and copy. But at least, for God's sake, try to address the tenant value thing through SAP ratings of 105 and above at least. It's not hard to do. You provide 80% of your space heating through a passive type of concept. You don't have to have the sealed windows and the energy, and the air all circulating, etc. So these 3 or 4 ingredients, do those things at least, please. And of course, don't forget the solar on the roof, which is going to become really valuable when you start to get into smart grids, etc. We're not really investing in that whole issue, as our beloved government want us to do. They want us to be this great powerhouse of zero carbon. Well, we're going to have to produce a lot more energy locally on our rooftops and wherever we need that energy. And again, that's not been thought through in this bigger brain that we actually need as far as the grid is concerned.
No, I think that's an absolutely fascinating point, because what has always seemed so extraordinary to me as somebody who, having had the responsibility in the context of energy and construction a decade ago, and trying everything I could at the time to sort of move the needle on construction, to bring building regulations to Wales so that we could change Part L, the focus on energy, to make sure that we actually could build zero carbon homes, and that would be the only kind of homes that could be built. And now, even a decade later, we're not there in that context, and yet there could really, in looking at the experience of people in houses, looking particularly at the experience of low-income people in houses, this is an area where sustainability saves a huge amount of money for the occupant. Both of you build homes that a tenant on very low income is only going to be paying something in the region of 12% of ordinary costs by living in your homes, and therefore is going to be able to stay warm. And so it's such an incredible advert, as it were, for why we should be doing more of this. So James, why do you think we are still where we are in terms of not enough people valuing the option, and not enough people, including governments, buying into the fact that this is the only kind of home that should be built from now on?
Well, I think, I think what we've seen, I think the political will has changed dramatically. I mean, even since, good for Glenn to mention the innovative housing program, because I'm in exactly the same place as Glenn. We've got a lot to thank for, priming the business to where it is now. That's a really important, it's been a really important part of our journey so far, of course. But the political will is clearly there. I think there's a danger that we want to test everything and find out, test this, wait, monitor it, wait to find out the right results. We've known the right results for many, many years. We just need to get on and change the real barriers, which are the sort of social, economic ones. The question of, the question, there's the big question of how we value, of course, and what we do. But I think there is, I certainly think since Sero was started, in 2017, things have changed dramatically. Technically, it wasn't a great idea back then, if I'm completely honest, because it's we have got a bit of a tanker to turn. I think that, of course, the housing industry is one where the business as usual approach is ingrained within every single process, design, engineering, building, procurement. There's a lot that has to change, and it's not going to change all of those industries overnight. But I think the best way we can, I very much believe that it's a little bit like electric vehicles. I think a good comparison. I think the housing sector somewhere on a similar journey. We need to build more. We need to build more good examples. Like T-Solar. There's lots of great. We need more and more and more of them. We need we need government to put as many great examples out there. So when somebody is down the pub talking about their low heating bill, or the fact that they've got green space around them and they're not, that it needs to be market driven. We need to change it, and that will then drive the value. People will want to live there. I don't think people really realize as well that social housing is typically better than private housing. Because of the design requirements, and I don't think actually that's well understood. So I think it needs to be market driven. I think the market will drive the value, and people will start to look for more. I think alongside that, we need to better portray the differences between one that is one that has a high carbon footprint versus one that isn't. We do it with food. We stick these labels on the front of the packets now to say, hey, this is really high in saturated fat, it's going to be bad for you. We need to do the same thing with housing. Really, we need to make the occupants aware that it's going to need retrofit. It's going to, it's very unlikely that it's going to comply with a 2050, which isn't a long time in the period of a building, of course, 30 years from now. But every new home that's built today needs retrofitting. Do people really understand that when they buy it? Do they understand that that they're at risk? Locking into fossil fuels is potentially at risk. We've already heard the government talk about leveling up gas and electricity. We could see some of the policy costs on electricity move across to gas. That's going to put a lot of heating bills up. So I think we don't understand the consequences well enough of living in a home that hasn't been built to a zero carbon standard. I think as soon as we get a better understanding of that, people will start to make the right decisions. We just need the right projects out there to give them the choice, of course.
I think that's a very important point, because I often just do a little test with friends. If you stop in the estate agent's window, and of course by law they have to show an energy performance certificate, and then you say to your friends, well, what does this mean? And
yeah.
People with multiple degrees have no idea.
Yeah, and I mean, and it, of course, and I mean,
it's probably you're meaning that you're going to pay double,
and
and it's going to be incredibly inefficient, and your house is going to be incredibly inefficient, and people don't see that. They don't understand that actually they're getting useful information, because the UK in particular resisted the idea of using those as a tool in the context of informing people about the use of energy.
But just to give you a little example there, Jane, we had a valuation done for a site, and it didn't even reference EPCs. So there was no reference to EPCs in any of the comparative benchmark cost information. Just to give you an example. So it's a long way to go with some of those industries, of course, like valuation and yeah.
Glenn, I've been picking up this developing agenda about fourth sector businesses driven by purpose. Is that where you see your work?
I think the time for stakeholder capitalism has arrived. I'm sorry to rephrase it a little bit, but I think again, going back about 20 years, when I was with my old firm, PwC, I tried to launch a service around being able to value stakeholder stakeholder value, around reputation, and it completely fell flat because, I mean, nobody was able to accept it. But I think things have moved on now, you know, and I think there is an openness. And if you heard those wonderful series of lectures from Mark Carney, I mean, he's doing a fantastic job trying to promote the stakeholder idea. And I hope that more and more, particularly, you know, when people like Legal in General and the financial community start to grapple with it and say, actually, you know, these companies that actually embrace stakeholder capitalism are the ones that we're going to really recommend that you actually go for, rather than people that go for, you know, totally hardcore old-fashioned capitalism. So I think yes, I think there is going to be an appetite for looking at companies that have a sense of purpose, because in a way, in terms of sustainability, it's those companies that will be the most long-lasting. The ones that are completely self-centered around private equity, slash and burn, strip everything away. Let's do I hate the name, I'll probably be done for a libel, but a certain type of businessman who has completely ruined an entire business empire in short-termism. I think people have started to say that, you know, that's not the way for the futures, particularly as investors. Investors have to drive this. Investors have to say, you know, I would positively want to invest in companies that follow a stakeholder model.
See, it's really interesting, Glenn, because you actually come from a major financial manager consultancy background. So is it your ideas about sustainability that drive your business model, or is it your business model that has driven your approach to sustainability?
It's a good question, you know. You know, I would love to say that it's my lovely ideas about the planet, etc., that drive this. But you know, it's quite the reverse. You know, we started trying to solve a business problem, the business problem around energy poverty, and interestingly enough, these other bits just fell together like a jigsaw. It just seemed the right thing to do. If you were to be able to solve that problem, then you have, you know, I've been through the thing again. You had to buy locally. You had to get the buy-in of local communities to get through the planning. You had to get this common sense of purpose. You had to employ people locally. You had to use something local like timber. So, you know, all those things sort of fell into place. And I think this type of thinking has been around in business for a long time. You know, doing the right thing. Companies that succeed actually do the right thing, and they do the right thing over and over and over again. And the ones that take shortcuts, the ones that don't, yes, they'll be very successful over a period of time, and then they'll completely fall flat on their faces. I think, you know, I think it's a very, you know, it sounds slightly religious, but I don't think it is. It's something about the elegance. It's something about the elegance of design. It's about something about the elegance of the way that this planet works. You know, you at the end of the day, you know, bad things catch up on you. So I think there is an elegance to the stakeholder model that I think will finally show the way.
James, you've been nodding away there. Is it the elegance of the stakeholder model? I mean, the same question to you. Is it, you know, is it your ideas about sustainability that have driven your business model? I mean, you talked about becoming a father and that being hugely influential in what you're doing, or was it your business model that has driven you to think about sustainability, or was it that same sort of serendipity that Glenn talked about when he met the right people at the right time for the right idea in the right place?
Yeah, it's kind of that you have that moment when you say, actually, this is a good idea, this is a good business opportunity, and it's going to have a good impact. And then you become really driven by both things, you know. And I think, and it's not, you know, it's a chicken and which came first, the chicken or the egg. And I think, you know, they both stimulate each other. You know, you feel the greater the impact, and then I'm reading a good book called Grow the Pie, a book by Alex Edmonds, which is that the best way to grow your share of the pie is just to grow the whole pie altogether, and then everybody benefits. That sort of, as Glenn put it, stakeholder capitalism. I mean, we it's really important to us as a business. I mean, we're just in the very final stages of having a B Corp certification. So something we've been doing pretty much all of this year. It's taken us quite some time. But of course, that's something that, we legally adopt into our company articles to look after people and the planet as part of the decision making for the company. And I think it's really important. I think particularly you mentioned the fourth sector, Jane, and I think it is important to distinguish yourself as a private company, as a mission-led business, and that I think that we see the B Corp as one way of getting some, a kite mark of that, really. And I think it comes down to everything. Whenever you work with the public sector or even not for profits, there's such a nervousness about working with the private sector that it's really hard to stand up and say, no, we're the good guys. We've got, we're going to do all these great things, but there isn't obviously a inherent sort of nervousness about procurement and working with private sector. So to be recognized, or to try and, I guess you could do it a number of ways. Reputation, of course, really important. You get on and you do it and you prove it. But also looking at how we treat our team, how we treat our suppliers, how we treat our partners, how we measure ourselves. It's all really important to do that transparently.
What's really interesting is that you're sharing a lot of the same values, but you're evidencing them in different kinds of ways. I mean, Glenn, what you were talking about, particularly in the context of the contribution to the local economy, is very much foundational, and something I think incredibly important in rural Wales, which is why I think you're such a sort of wonderful example of developing something really innovative and entrepreneurial. In an environment where you've had to work a lot harder to get anybody to notice what you're doing, and then James, what you're doing, and that combination of your renewable energy expertise matched with an architect. It's interesting how you're both matching with architects to create something incredibly special. Architects on mission, leaders on purpose. But both of you are still creating a very small number of homes against the needs of Wales and against the output of the volume house builders who are still creating houses that none of us would want to live in. Well, potentially now, but certainly in a decade's time. So how do we encourage more businesses into this space? How do we encourage more businesses to understand the value of the whole life cycle in the context of housing, rather than just literally bricks and mortar, which is actually what you're both disrupting as an old pattern book technology? Glenn.
Well, if I can go first, I'm a great advocate of the tipping point idea. You probably read the Malcolm Gladwell fantastic book, and I've used that a few times in the past with some success. And Malcolm Gladwell proposes to get this huge iceberg moving, to get this huge super tanker changed around. You need three archetypes. The first thing is you need someone who's a salesman, who stands up on that soapbox and says, Gen is evil, or in fact, zero carbon is the way forward. So it proselytizes the whole value of the idea. Very someone who's a very good salesman. And the second thing you need a good maven. A maven is a Yiddish term, I think, that actually means someone who is really deeply credentialed in a topic. A technical expert who can answer every single question that needs to be answered. And then the third one, and this is something that Jane, that you are par excellence, is the connector. the networker, and you need those three things working in parallel. You need the person on the soapbox, you need the technicians, and this is what we're both working with architects, by the way. And then you need people like yourself. You need the connectors, you need the networkers, and it's a combination of those three things. If Welsh government wants to get this whole thing going, they need to identify people like that, in the housing associations, in the councils, in society, that conform to those three things. And that's the way I think that we're going to see change happening. That is before, obviously, we get to things like regulation to say, we're not going to have bricks and mortar and category C houses being built anymore. There is that bit that's going to help as well. But I think you need those three archetypes in there helping the thing along.
James, what about you?
I think that was a great answer, Glenn. I think we I think so. I think one of the important, we actually set up a whole separate company purely to make it easier for others to adopt what it is that we wanted to do. So we took the approach that we needed a vehicle, we needed an organization that could partner and help others do what we were trying to do. I think, I'm not going to turn around and say we need to change building regulations. I think obviously that's we do have a housing crisis. We need to house people and we need to keep building. And but of course that would be an easy solution to suggest. I think we need to make it easier for the companies that want to do better. The IHPs, coming back to that, is a good example of a program that has allowed companies like ours to innovate, to come along, to really get their businesses moving. And there will be lots of other businesses like that out there. I'll quote my co-founder now. The green, net zero is as big a business opportunity as the internet was. It really is. And I think it's becoming more realized that actually it's a great business opportunity. But I think we need to make it easy. We also can't expect these solutions to fall into place overnight, because the way we do things, the business usual approach, is very difficult to fight against, and there are barriers all over the place, particularly in housing. But we need to make it easier for those companies that want to do better, and are driven to do better, because they do exist. We speak to people all the time to say we want to do this, but whether it's they bought the land 3 years ago and they can't, just picking up on a point that Glenn made about value to the tenant. It's a really difficult challenge, that one, because a lot of these sites are bought years before, the consents are put in place years before. It's very difficult to all of a sudden change the financial model overnight. And then there's this perception that the tenant then gets all of the benefit of that. The company's got to invest more and all the benefits pass through to the tenant. We need to be a bit more intelligent about how we level that up a little bit and pass a good benefit through to the tenant, but also offset the risk, offset the extra costs for the builder as well. So I think we need to really rethink the whole value chain. Quite a lot of in my experience, quite a lot of companies aren't valuing the retrofit liability. I think once you add these things up, the costs, the changing, the risk, future risk profile around energy pricing, retrofit liability, but the potential for value to decrease in properties because they're not at a certain standard as well. Once you start adding all these things up, it becomes a no-brainer to build something to a better standard today. But we look back, we don't look forward in housing. We look at evidence and track, history. We don't think about the next 30 years, and that's what we need to start doing. So I think there's lots of willing businesses out there, and there's lots of people who'd like to adopt better solutions. And I think we can go some way to make it easier.
I saw a sentence on your website that I think applies to you both. In short, we create the sort of homes and the neighbourhoods that we would like to live in ourselves. Why would we build anything else? And I think that's a great question on which to finish this session. And can I thank you both so much? I mean, you are both eco-entrepreneurs. You have both taken a disruptive step outside the mainstream of housing. I'm delighted that you were able to be assisted by the Innovation Housing Grant from the Welsh Government, and hope that the Welsh Government will continue to fund housing that will benefit future generations and will factor whole life cycle costs into housing, so that in Wales we can offer sustainable homes for sustainable futures, and that here becomes the norm rather than the exception. And I look very much forward, James, to come and seeing one of your homes, because I've been I think I've been in 3 of Glen's homes, including his most recent building in Boncath, which I know is up for sale at the moment. But thank you so much. You've brought a rich discussion together today, that by your different experiences but common passion for better housing for Wales, I hope will encourage others to also move on to this path. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jane. Thank you.